All right, well, hello and welcome to today's training webinar. My name's Teresa and I'll be walking you through this session. If you haven't been to one of these sessions before, we encourage as many questions as you may think of, so feel free to ask those through the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. The purpose of the session today is really to guide you through a particular topic. In this case, we're going to be looking at organisational reference codes, or GREF codes for short, and their particular uses. But it is designed as a training session, so feel free to ask questions as we go. All right, so what we're going to be looking at today are, as I mentioned, all GREF codes. So first thing we need to work out is, what are they for? Now, these are a little feature that have a broad use case. So let me go through those for you today. And they really solve a lot of little questions that you may come up against when you're creating your reporting suite. So if you're building your content, you're setting up your charts and things like that. They address a lot of little areas. So basically what they're designed to do is add extra meaning to the data that's returned from your database. And there's a few different ways they can do this. So the first way is they have the ability to define a particular display value that they can show anytime a certain value is returned from the database. So they kind of like a mask or a label over the top. The second way they can do this is by allowing you to define a custom sorting order for your data. So, for example, you can change the sort on standard reports from ascending to descending order by alphabetical order or numeric. But custom sorting allows you to sort of apply weights to particular values so that they appear in the top or the bottom of the list, things like that. And we will explore each of these points. So the next way that they can add extra meaning is by allowing you to associate a color and or an image with each value. So you may have a little icon that represents some of your key departments or product codes or things like that. And Yellowfin allows you to incorporate that into your reporting suite. And finally, we allow you to associate areas of an image with pieces of data, and this is part of a larger function called Raster Maps. We'll slightly look at these today, but if you want an in-depth demonstration on how to achieve that, we have a separate webinar just covering those in particular. All right, so we've had a little introduction. Let's have a look at the different uses in action. So why would I need them? So the first scenario is using custom labels. So the table here on the left is what's returned straight from my database into Yellowfin. So I created a basic report. I dragged in my camp country field and my sales field, and the table on the left is the result. Now, what you can see here is my database actually records countries using the ISO code system, and it's a 2-letter system to denote each country. This is great for databases. It keeps things small and it's a really efficient way of doing things, but it's not so great for the final output of your report, for the business user and for consumers of your reporting results, whatever they may be. So you may have even customers consuming this kind of thing. So what we did was we applied an all GREF code, which basically mapped each of these 2-letter codes to a full version of the country's name. So someone sat there and entered in all the country names once, and then anytime Yellowfin uses this particular field, it displays the full country name instead of the 2-letter code. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, I can actually achieve this via my database because I've got my country code in the database, but I've also got the label or the descriptor in there as well. And that's great. That's perfect. You can drag that description field across and use that in your reports. That's wonderful. But some systems haven't allowed for that, or you may be working on a legacy system that you don't want to add an additional column to at this point in time, things like that. This provides a solution there. So it's kind of like a temporary in-between stage. So what you can see here is the AU has been mapped to Australia and so on. So that's the first use of it, and it's really just providing a nicer label. There are other ways of doing this. So what we'll have a look at when we demonstrate how to set this up is we might convert gender from F and M to full female and male text and things like that. All right, so the next item we'll have a look at is sorting. And a lot of the time, sorting alphabetically or perhaps sorting by numeric value is perfect. Like it does cover the majority of cases. So you might sort your report alphabetically so you get all your locations in alphabetical order, which makes sense to the user. It helps them search for particular values because they know the alphabet, hopefully, and it just keeps things a little bit easier. Alternatively, a really common method of sorting is sorting by value. So say, for example, you've got a top 10 report. So say you have 1,000 products, but you really want to concentrate on those top 10 sellers at the moment. So you've created your top 10 report. Now, you could sort this in alphabetical order by like product name, something like that. But to identify the ranking of that top 10, so what's the biggest value and what's the proportion, you'd probably actually sort that by, sales or something like that. So both of those are standard types of sorting. They're alphabetic or numeric. What we have here, though, is a common issue that we've come across. This data set has month name in the database, but it's purely stored as month name. So it's a text value. And as you can see, if we sort it alphabetically, it's not going to be much use to our users because Yellowfin doesn't understand that there's sort of a time component associated with this text. So what we did here, and what we'll explore a little bit later, is we applied a custom sort order so that it's sorted chronologically. And this just means we told Yellowfin that January is the first month, February is the second, and so on. So what Yellowfin does is it displays the values from the database, but it sorts them the way we told them how to. So we informed Yellowfin how to sort it correctly for our business needs. Some people might be looking at this and going, okay, that's great, but I've actually got dates in my database and I just format my dates so that they look like month names. And again, this is the ideal way to go the majority of the time. But some people don't have the capacity to have the full date. They just have that piece of text that says month, whether it's because of the transactional system and how it logs the data, or an ETL job that's ancient and they don't want to change, or something like that. So this is a nice way to address the solution if you can't get around it at the database. Okay, so the next item we'll have a look at is applying colours and images or associating them with data. So a really common scenario here is to associate an icon with, say, a department or a product grouping or something like that. In our sample situation here, we've actually got demographics associated with our clientele. And what we did was we associated a little icon with each of those that we use in our branding and things like that. And what we've done is actually chosen to display the icon next to the value when we use it as a filter. And what we found is this makes it a lot easier for some users to identify what they're after really quickly, rather than having to read the whole list. They can quickly identify with the colours or the images. So you can see here on the left, this is our standard filter list. In the middle, we've associated an image, And on the right, we've chosen just a color. So you don't have to use an icon if you don't have them. You may just have colors. So some examples of this might be for a university. You'll find that universities, or we have found that universities often have colours and logos associated with each department. So, for example, the arts department will have a different colour to medicine and to IT and things like that. And it was really useful to apply that same branding through the reports because users were already familiar with that kind of branding and that kind of styling, and it just brought some consistency through from other areas of their business as well as ease of use. Okay, so that's another way of using all graph codes. And the next way is by using the same color that we associated and used in the filter area, but using those colors to define chart colors. Now, this particular screenshot is a little bit small, so we'll have a look at it in the main system in a moment. But basically what we've done here is we've assigned a color. So if I return to my previous slide, we've assigned a color to each demographic value. So adventure is blue and family is yellow, for example. And then on each of our charts, we've made sure that we use those colors with those values. So adventure is blue, family is yellow, and we've done it across all three so that it's really easy to identify the same value or the same sort of segment across multiple visualizations or separate reports and things like that. So again, this is really addressing sort of ease of use factors here. So when you're introducing new users to a system, it's really important to try and make everything as easy as possible to make sure that they adapt and find it simple to pick up. And as such, use the system more. So if they know when they're on a chart that blue means what did blue mean? It meant adventure. Obviously, I'm not familiar enough with our colouring. But if they know blue means adventure, it's just going to make things a lot quicker to read when they're investigating particular charts and things like that. So again, that's really a nice way to do things. And it also means that your user doesn't have to manually pick the same colours over and over when they're building their charts. They can just use the set, and we'll explore how to do that shortly. Now, finally, we come to raster maps. And as I mentioned before, this really is quite a large topic in its own right. So if you do want an in-depth look at how to create a raster map, just have a look at our previous webinars. I think a month or two ago we did one on raster maps. But basically what we've done here is we've taken a custom image for the business. In this case, it was a university. We took their campus map. We color-coded that particular campus map and associated departments and room numbers and things, which we got from the database, with areas of the image. And what that allowed us to do was color each building based on a rating system that we had between 0 and 10. So you can see the higher the rating, the closer to this aqua color it is, the darker, the poorer the rating. You could do that for all sorts of things. So we've had people use raster maps for X-ray type images, so skeletons and muscular diagrams and things like that to point out where the most injuries occur, or several different floor plans or engine plans and car blueprints and things like that. So anything you can basically think of, if you're creative, probably more so than me, you can convert that into something that Yellowfin can kind of highlight for you. And that's all done again with all graph codes. All right, so really that's probably enough of me just giving you the dry stuff and walking you through the theory. So let's really dive in and have a look into the presentation now and how we do this. So I'm just going to exit this storyboard. And the first things first, we really need to look at how to create a ref code from scratch. So I'm going to go into administration. Now, when you're working with ref codes, if you need to be able to build or manipulate them, you will have to have certain levels of administration access, or you may need to request that an administrator or an advanced user of your system does this for you. So I personally have full admin access in this particular system, so we'll see everything as we go. But if you don't have access to something we explore today, just talk to whoever runs your system. All right, so I'm going to go into the admin console. And the way we build out a ref code is by attaching it to a field in a view. And the reason we do this is to create that map, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. We actually have to grab some data from the database, or it's most helpful to do so anyway. So I'm going to go to my views here, and we'll explore those, and I've got one ready to go, funnily enough. And what I'll just do is edit that. When we're creating an org ref code, what we do is we set up our view as normal, so we're not going to worry about this particular step here. And then we're going to progress to our second step. And what we're going to do is identify which fields require these reference codes. So we're actually going to create a few here because we've got a few different methods we want to look at. So the first one might be looking at our gender field. So if I click on this and I go into format, what you'll see is it's going to return text at this point in time. So it's just going to return what's in my database. If I change this to be org ref code, what it's going to do now is ask me, okay, well, do you want to use an existing reference mapping? Say I've already created this ref code, I can apply it to several gender fields if I have them. So for example, if I had a database that had staff gender as well as customer gender, I could apply the same code to both. That would be fine. But for the purpose of today, we're going to create a new type and pretend we haven't done this before. So what it's now asking me is, do I want to populate that from the database? So basically what it's going to do is have a look at my gender field in my database and produce a list of unique values that it finds. Now, personally, I find this option very helpful the majority of the time. It saves a little bit of time mostly. But on occasion, you may want to just type in the values yourself manually. And the reason for that might be you're setting up a new view based on a database that perhaps isn't populated yet. You might know that you'll have a female and male and non-disclosed record, but the database is empty at this point, so it won't do any good trying to search the data for values that aren't there. So anyway, raving. So we're going to pre-populate from the database. So I just say yes. And what's happened here is it's gone to my database and said, okay, I can see female and I can see male. Now, say we want to actually convert this for our youth category. So we cater for customers of all ages, but we actually have a separate youth program that covers youth up to the age of 18. So what I might call this is my youth gender listing. And on the left, I have my values from the database. And on the right, I have the values that Yellowfin's going to show in the report. So one by one, I'm going to click on those. And it's important to leave this left side as it is if you've brought it from the database. So I might call this girls. And I refresh, and we'll call this boys. All right, so you can see anytime it finds male, it's going to show boys and so on. So we'll save that, and then we get this listing here. Okay, so I'll save that. Now, anytime I use this field in a report, it will automatically get that reference code. Now, if I'd already used this particular field in a report, it wouldn't get that reference code, but I could apply it, which I'll show you later. The next thing we're going to have a look at is applying that custom sort order. So remembering the example of the different months and trying to order those, I'm going to apply that to my month field that I have here. So I'll just double click on that, and it's the same process. I go to Format, I go to Old Greph Code, and in this situation I might use an existing type, and we'll just have a look at editing one. So we'll edit this. And what you'll see here is what we did was we went through, and for each value we actually applied a custom sort order. Okay, so we told it January was 1, February was 2, and so on. So like when we set up our gender values, we would have just added our sort order onto the end there. Okay. So we'll cancel that. Now, another example that I'll show you that we won't create today because it takes a little bit long is our country list. So you can see here there's the example that I had in my storyboard where I have this value in my database and this value in my report. Okay, so someone's gone and entered those in very lovingly and now they're ready to use. Okay, so from here we save the view. So you may be thinking, okay, I know that you talked about images and colors, Teresa, you've forgotten them. Where do we do those? We're actually going to get to those in a moment. So that happens outside of the view. So what happens in the view is setting up the values as well as the sorting, and outside is everything else. Okay, so we have an excellent question here that comes up anytime I talk about ref codes. The question is, can you import the country codes instead of typing them? Now, when you're talking about using ref codes, unfortunately, no, you can't. So it's just a matter of sort of manually entering in the country names. The reason for this is kind of generally, if you have access to the full country names, you'd probably have them in your source database one way or another. And if you've got them in your database, you don't need ref codes because you can just use that instead of the two-letter code. So there are ways around that. So for example, you could import a CSV with those country names and then attach them to your view and use it that way. This is just one way of achieving that for the purpose of using ref codes. All right. So what we're going to do here is create a report, and we'll just have a look at associating that ref code with a field. So I'm going to use my gender field here. And you can see instantly it's gone with boys and girls instead of male and female. So I'll just drag in my values. Now, if I wanted to change this and say, for example, this particular report was concentrating on our athletes that are adults, what I would do is just go to Format on the field. I would go to Edit, and I just simply change this back to text. So you can see it's actually the same list of options that we had in the view. So if I close that, you can see this is the original value. And alternatively, I can reapply if I need to. And I might even have a different option in here. So this might be my adult option, which just tidies it up a little bit. Okay, so it's very, very simple to apply a reference code. All right, so the next item we'll have a look at is this month item. So let me drag in my month fields. We won't drill on this one. And you can see Yellowfin's automatically sorted that by month. By month name, I should say, so by alphabetical order. So what I will do is go in and just change this to be my month sort. Okay, and you can see now it's sorted correctly. Now if I wanted it in descending order, that would be fine. I could change that. and it's still using my custom sort, just in descending order. All right. So the next thing we're going to have a look at are using some images and colors. So I'll just close this report and we'll return to the admin area. And we're just going to explore this org ref codes area here. So once you've created a ref code list, they'll appear here in administration, and this is where you can edit them outside of the view, including applying sorting, colors and images. So we might have a look at my demographic one now. And what you'll see here is we've got our code, so that's our database value. We've got our description. Then we've got our custom sort order, followed by colors that we've associated and images. Now let's just have a look at how to do that on one we know doesn't have any color options yet. So youth gender, for example, is one of those. So we just created this one. So what we want to do is say, okay, well, I want to allow custom sorting. I also want to allow colors and maybe even images. So we're going to put girls at the top and boys second for no particular reason other than it's different from the standard sorting. Then we're going to apply a color. So I might put orange for girls and green for boys. Okay, so there's my color. Now I can pick any color. If I've got corporate colors, I can type in the hex value here. So don't worry about that too much. And finally, I can associate images. So if I have images in my system, I can pick those. Otherwise, I can upload new ones. So I'll just pick a couple of images there. And I've associated those the wrong way, but you get the idea. All right. Oh, okay, sorry, we had a question saying that they missed how we got to that screen. So basically, I'm just in the admin area again, but I'll just go to the dashboard and show you from scratch. So if you go to the admin console and just scroll down, you should have org reference codes there. Now just open that and then select the one you want to manipulate. So demographic, for example. And there's your setup. Okay, so we have a follow-up question saying that this person doesn't have the options. How do they get them? So this might have to be something that you talk to whoever set up your system, because these are based on role permissions. So I'm an administrator and I have access to all the areas of Yellowfin. If you're, say, a report writer, you may not have access to this section. So you just need your administrator to assign it for you. So you just need access to this admin area. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have a look at are applying those colors and images to both filters and charts. So I'm going to create a report again, and we'll do it on the view that we just used. And I'm going to use my demographic field, which I know has that ref code applied to it. And I'm going to put this demographic in my filter area. All right, so we'll just go to the output for the moment. And what you'll see is I instantly have a list of values. Now, for those of you who have created reports with filters before, you'll notice that normally you wouldn't have values show up like that. Normally you would have to cache the values. But in this scenario, what we allow you to do is just grab those values from that ref code. So it treats it like a predefined kind of value list. The only problem with this is if you've added new products since you created your reference code, they may not be included in your list. And that's the problem with the translation stuff as well. It's very sort of static. You can't schedule it to update. So you would have to manually go back into the view or into the admin area and add your new options. Whereas with alternatives, they do stay up to date. So just think of reference codes as something that's really more useful for static values. So things like month names, which are never going to change, as opposed to, product names, which change quite regularly. Okay, so you can see I've got my values there. The next thing I want to do is show you how to add those images and colors. So I just need to change my display to use this left side nav. Okay, so now we've got our values. The next thing I want to do, just close that, is go into my filter area and access my filter. And you'll see I actually have a display style here. So I'm going to go with image and text next. And if I open this up, I now have my images there. And we found that that's a really great way of users selecting their values. They love using the icons as long as they're useful. Don't just put them in there for the hell of it. Make sure it has a purpose. And alternatively, if you don't have icons, you can go with color, or if you just prefer color. Okay, so there's your colors. All right, so that's how you add them to the filter area. It's very, very easy. The same thing goes for the dashboard. So if you've got them in the report level, they'll flow through to the left nav dashboard display. Now, if I return to my chart, and maybe we'll create a pie chart just because. And I'm going to drag in my items. What happens now is when I associate my field that has the reference code with the color area of the chart, I have the option to style this. So you can see at the moment we're using the default. If I change it to reference code, I now have my reference code colors applied. But it's a little bit hard to tell there. So what I'm going to do is drag in my gender field and we'll just switch that. Okay, so if I change this to be the default system colors, by our standard set, we'd go with blue, then red, then yellow, and cycle through a range of colors. But if I go into color and select reference code, it'll pick up that orange and green that we set in the admin page and show that on our chart. So we just need to enable that each time. And it's a lovely alternative to having to try and sort of manually set it using conditional formatting or various other methods. Okay, so that's it, setting it up on charts. And finally, we're just going to have a really quick look at raster maps. So let's have a look at those. To do that, we're again in the admin console. So we return to the admin console. Then we go to images and maps. And again, this is just a very quick overview. And what we'll have a look at here is we'll have a look at our map images and we'll explore our broken bones in this scenario. So you can see here, this is a small preview of the image, but we actually had an image of a skeleton and we colored the bone groups of the arm, different unique shades of color, so yellow through to red in this scenario. And what we did was we created a reference code. So you can see on the left, that's our label. In the middle, that's our code that came from the database. And then we associated with the color that was in the image. And then what happens is Yellowfin can find the clavicle in the image via this particular color, so the yellow in this scenario. And then it's used for highlighting purposes and things like that. Now, if you have questions or you want to explore reference codes, because they really do solve a lot of little issues and formatting things that you'd like to tweak, have a look at our wiki. So if you go to the wiki.yellowfin.com.au and search for org reference codes, you'll find this page, which explores setting them up in administration. You'll also find this page that explores setting them up in the view. And finally, you'll find a raster map page that explores raster maps in quite a lot of detail. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll also find some videos. We have embedded those throughout the wiki, but if you just want to look at videos, they're there. All right, so do we have any questions around reference codes? While you think of those, so just to return to that language question that we talked about earlier. So as I showed you on the admin page, you can actually set different values for different languages. So you could translate red to the Spanish red and Japanese red and however you pronounce it in each of those languages. The only thing is it's just really not robust enough for a lot of translation requirements. So while you can do it for small pieces here and there that you need translated, it's not a great solution for a really robust large translation system. If you did want to look into that, we'll have a look for dynamic conditions in here. So I would suggest having a look. You basically go to the wiki, have a look at table conditions and look at dynamic conditions. And it basically means you have in your database each of the different language values, and Yellowfin will have the one report, but it'll toggle those values based on a user setting. So the user can say, look, I need to see this in English, so we'll show the English records. I need to see this in Japanese, show the Japanese records and things like that. So I'd recommend having a look at those and seeing if that's helpful for you. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into what reference codes can do for you and what reports you might be able to enhance by using them. If you have any questions, I will be here for a little while longer. And if you have any suggestions for future sessions, please send them through, because we often run these sessions purely based on suggestions. So thanks again for your time and have a lovely rest of your day.